Even today, when we want to point at this or that as the reason for the fall of Rome, we aren't able to agree. And for a good reason. Just as Rome wasn't built in a day, it didn't fall in a single one either. The fall of Rome is a complex issue that spanned centuries. Some historians highlight economic decline as the reason, others that it was the consequence of the already crumbling empire. Some give greater importance to epidemics and environmental changes, others blame solely barbarian incursions. The truth is that Rome didn't really fall in 476, as school textbooks teach us so hard to believe. Even if we completely ignore the continuation of the eastern half as a political entity, the one we call the Byzantine Empire, though its inhabitants would continue to call their empire themselves Roman, contemporary Romans didn't feel that much change in 476. After the death of Attila in 453, there followed 2 decades of steep decline of the Western Roman Empire. During that time, 9 emperors took to the throne. They represented different centers of power within and without the shrinking empire. The most prominent figure during this time was the military commander Ricimer, who continued and increased his role in imperial politics, like his predecessors Stilicho and Aetius, who had an instrumental role during the time of Alaric and Attila respectively. Besides him, the most influential parties in the dying empire were the Roman Senate, Italian and Gaul elites, Vandals in Africa, Visigoths and Burgundians in the west. The latter political entities effectively became separate from the government of the empire, creating their own more or less independent states. A special mention deserves the land of Dalmatia, which under capable leadership and good position between Eastern and Western empires, managed to form ties with both, maintaining its self-rule until 481, when it was absorbed into Italy by Odoacer. Its last ruler, Julius Nepos, was also the last legitimate emperor in the west, but went to rule Dalmatia after a coup against him. After the death of Attila, Odoacer's father became the king of Skiri, settling between the Danube and Tisa rivers. After he fell in battle in 469, Odoacer and his followers left for Italy, where he entered the Roman emperor's service. But as said before, people on the throne changed very quickly, while Odoacer's influence at the court grew. The last emperor, young Romulus Augustulus, was the son of Orestes, Attila's Roman secretary and one of the most influential men at his court. In 476, Odoacer rose in rebellion against Orestes, ostensibly to ensure the status of Germanic soldiers in service of Rome and their pay would become equal as that of the regular Roman troops. Orestes was defeated and executed, forcing Romulus to abdicate as the emperor. Odoacer took over as de facto king of Italy, while the little emperor was exiled to a small island near Naples. At the first glance, it would indeed seem that this was indeed a groundbreaking event, one to change the course of history. A barbarian took over Italy, home and core of the great empire, crowned himself with the historically hated title of king and deposed the Roman emperor. But when we look deeper, we find out that not much changed. The little emperor Romulus wasn't even a legitimate emperor, merely an usurper put there by his father, at least in the eyes of the Eastern Empire. Julius Nepos, the legitimate emperor, the last one in the west, was still in Dalmatia after the coup. Additionally, Romulus Augustulus, under the pressure from Odoacer, sent a senatorial embassy to Constantinople where they surrendered imperial regalia of the Western Empire to the Eastern Emperor Zeno, saying that there was no need now for another emperor in the west, and recommended Odoacer as their candidate to manage its lands and army as Zeno's delegate in Italy. At the same time, an embassy also arrived from Dalmatia, requesting monetary and military help for Nepos to regain the Western Empire. Zeno, emperor in the east, tried to gain time and play good by both sides. Nepos never managed to launch a campaign to reinstate himself on the throne. He was murdered in 480. As one of many more gestures of goodwill and propaganda, Odoacer executed the murderers. Until Nepos's death, Odoacer even minted coins with his profile, but after, Dalmatia was reabsorbed into Italy. Despite many attempts of reconciliation between Odoacer and Zeno, the latter never completely acknowledged the former as the ruler in the west. That being said, the following 13 years of Odoacer's rule were a period of relative stability for the kingdom. These were followed by a war with Theodoric of Ostrogoths, supported by Emperor Zeno. In 489, Theodoric marched into Italy against the elder Odoacer. Almost 4 years of war later, a bishop of Verona managed to arrange a compromise between the two warlords. They would rule Italy together. Odoacer would surrender his son to Theodoric as a hostage, but his life would be guaranteed. But Theodoric marched into Ravenna and soon after killed Odoacer as well as his family. Despite Odoacer's defeat, the foundation of the new state was used by Theodoric to form an even more prosperous kingdom than Odoacer did. What's more, Theodoric succeeded where Odoacer failed so often. Constantinople soon acknowledged Theodoric as a legitimate ruler in the West. And actually, it wouldn't be until the reign of Theodoric and his Ostrogoth state in 525 that we record the first remark about the fall of the Western Roman Empire and the beginning of a new era. So, though the Western Roman Empire stopped being Roman or even an empire, the designation of the year 476 as the year that the Roman Empire fell is far from true. In fact, Odoacer's rule meant the continuation of the Roman state and many of its institutions rather than its demise. For contemporary Romans, not much changed. There was another man on the throne, the crisis continued, but the Eastern Roman Empire with its capital in Constantinople still held well together and would continue to hold on for almost 1000 years. But what about the Eastern Roman Empire? Was there ever a danger that it would reach its end at the same time as the Western did? The short answer is no. The causes for the West to fall never really plagued the East to any severe point. The Eastern Roman Empire didn't permanently give up large chunks of territory to barbarian invaders, and while economic power of the West fell, the economy and demography of the East actually expanded. Invading barbarians soon gained the upper hand in Western Roman politics and could force the Romans into any concessions they wanted. Western provinces were easily taken over by barbarian armies, sometimes even with the consent of the weakened Roman government. In the east, only Balkan provinces had to endure prolonged barbarian presence. This caused damage locally, but could never spread further due to heavily guarded geographical barriers of the east. At the same time, the Roman Empire also established peaceful relations with the neighboring superpower of Persia, which allowed undisturbed transfer of resources along the east while not having to spend money on any bigger conflicts. The border with the barbaric tribes was also more limited than that of the west. The barbarian domination never became severe in the east, while the west increasingly relied on barbarians to fill its ranks, and eventually its military power consisted of a barbarian supreme general commanding a largely barbarian army. In the long term, that would have huge repercussions for a Roman Empire. In the east, the Roman army was still in large part recruited by Romans and was divided among a number of military commands, preventing the rise of a single military tyrant. The senatorial political elite could maintain their power and ability to rule, while in the west even the emperor was reduced to being just a symbolic figurehead. But the Western Empire was now indeed fully replaced by states with barbaric rulers and customs, though many of these were by now far more Romanized. Today, the year 476 is important as the year that marks the end of the ancient history of Europe and the beginning of the medieval period. If you want to see an example of how the Roman Empire Romanized lands and peoples it conquered, check out the next video. Be sure to like, subscribe, you know how YouTube works, and I'll bring you more history soon.